Copenhagen. The year is 1823. The harbour is alive with sound. Sailors call to each other. Wooden masts creak in the wind. Seagulls circle above, crying out over the smell of salt and fish. In the middle of it all walks a small boy, barefoot, thin, 10 years old. His name is Emil. The harbour is not just where he works. It is where he lives. Every morning Emil searches the ground. A coin dropped by a sailor, a shrimp fallen from an overfilled basket. Small things, but enough to keep him alive, enough to trade for bread, sometimes even for a bowl of warm soup. The fishermen know him. Some laugh and call him the harbour mouse. Some ignore him. A few old men, kinder than the rest, toss him scraps to see him dart after them. Emil never begs. He only works with what chance gives him. At night, when the harbour is quiet, Emil sits by the water. He holds a single coin in his hand. He watches the moonlight reflect on the metal, and he dreams. He dreams of belonging, of owning a place among the men of the sea, not to survive on scraps, but to provide. Years pass. Emil grows. His hands harden from work. He mends nets for a few coins. He carries heavy baskets. He scrubs decks until his back aches. All the while he listens. He listens to stories of storms, of lost ships, and of fortunes made. The harbour mouse becomes a young man, strong, determined. When he is 16, Emil makes his first true step. After years of saving every coin, he buys a net, old, patched, small, but it is his very own. That night, under the bright moon, he lowers it into the dark water. His heart beats fast, and he whispers to himself, not a prayer, a promise. One day he will rise from the cobblestones. One day he will command not scraps, but ships. The sea says nothing, but the waves carry his promise out into the night. The months that followed were not easy. Emil's first net tore often. Sometimes it caught nothing. Sometimes the sea gave only a few shrimp, barely enough to sell, but Emil did not quit. He patched the net with steady hands. He rose before dawn. He worked until his body ached. Slowly he began to earn a few extra coins, a handful of shrimp, some fish, small but fresh. The townspeople started to recognize him. They saw the boy who once scrambled for scraps, now selling from his own catch. Not much, but his own. By 18, Emil had enough to buy a small boat, old and creaking just like the net. But still it was a boat, his boat. He painted it himself, blue along the sides, white on the bow. He named it Hobet, hope. Sailing out for the first time, Emil felt the wind on his face, the harbour behind him, the open sea ahead. He was no longer just a helper, no longer just the harbour mouse. He was a fisherman. The years rolled on. Emil worked harder than anyone else on the docks. He brought in catches even when storms threatened. He learned to read the sea, the clouds, the shift of the wind. He grew broad-shouldered, his skin rough with salt, his eyes sharp with focus. Soon, one boat was not enough. He bought a second, then a third. Other young men, boys like he once had been, came to him for work. He gave them a place, he gave them purpose, and together they hauled in fish and shrimp by the barrel. By his mid-20s, Emil was no longer just a fisherman. He was building something larger, a business, a name in Copenhagen's harbour. The boy who once gathered scraps was now feeding half the city. And yet, at night when the harbour grew quiet, Emil still walked the same old pier. Sometimes he would stop, look out at the water, and remember the boy with bare feet and empty hands. He carried that memory with him, always, because he knew the sea gives nothing for free. Every coin, every catch, every boat, it had all been earned, and still his story was only beginning. By the time Emil reached his 30s, the harbour no longer saw him as the poor boy who once scrambled for shrimp. They saw him as a man of the sea, a leader. His boats came in heavy with fish, their decks piled high, the crews proud of their work. He had built a company, not with investors, not with family wealth, but with his own hands, his own stubborn will, and the endless patience of the sea. He owned several boats now, each painted in the same blue and white as his very first, each carrying young men who trusted him. Every morning, Copenhagen awoke to the sound of Emil's catch being brought ashore. Barrels of cod, baskets of shrimp, silver herring flashing in the sunlight, townspeople gathered to buy. The smell of salt and fresh fish spread through the streets. Families ate because of the work he and his men did. And Emil never forgot what it felt like to go hungry. He paid his workers fairly. He shared what he could with those who had nothing. He looked for boys on the pier, the ones with bare feet and empty hands, just as he had once been, and he gave them work. Still, he remained a quiet man. He did not boast. He did not speak of riches. He spoke only of the sea, of its danger, of its gifts, of its endless pull. On clear nights, long after the harbour had fallen silent, Emil would walk to the water's edge, the city behind him, the dark waves before him. He would stand there listening to the tide, remembering his first coin, his first net, his first boat. He had risen from nothing, from scraps on the cobblestones to a fleet that fed a city. But in his heart, he was still the same boy who had once whispered a promise to the sea, and as the waves lapped against the pier, it felt as if the sea whispered back, not in words, but in the endless rhythm of the tide, a reminder that every journey, no matter how great, begins with something small, a coin, a shrimp, a dream.